Hello friends. Today's video is going to be a little different from my normal type of video. As you can tell, I'm not on camera this time, but I hope you enjoy the gameplay of Nubby's Number Factory. So, the other day, I saw this video of presumably a school teacher. I'll play it for you, but it's of a school teacher who lets their kids, choose the names that they'll use for the class, which is a fun little concept.
Bob, nice to meet you. What would you like to be called today? What would you say? Thkuna. Thakuna. Like Thakuna Matata. Get it? What would you like to be called?
I would like to be called Name.
Like the word name?
Yeah.
Alright.
Name.
There you are, name.
Thank you. My name.
What would you like to be called today, ma'am? What would you say? Thorn?
Yep.
Okay. It's Thorn. There you go.
You know, at first it seems very innocuous and kind of, just like, okay, this is just a fun little thing. But it got me really thinking. I just really liked this as a concept for something to do in the classroom. And it got me thinking about names as a sort of philosophical concept and how it sort of shapes our society. When you think about it, our names, sort of the signifiers of our personhood in our social context, they don't tend to come up very often in philosophical discussion. These things are kind of taken a lot for granted, almost as if they were just like inherent aspects of our existence, but we know that they're not. They are things that we made up. Yet we associate ourselves so intimately with our names that they start to certainly become more than just a word, but the sort of embodiment of our identity in a certain way. What I find fascinating about this is the potential for change in our society, what it would look like if we were to change our approach to naming, much like the way that the teacher is doing in the video. It's very commonly understood that language shapes our thought, the way that we think about the world. And as I've explained, personal names come to shape our identity, certainly. So, when I see this video and children are given the opportunity to choose their own name, even just temporarily in a situation, it got me thinking about what this would look like, sort of on a greater scale. For one, it's an interesting fact about names that they're not chosen by the named person, right? They come to represent our identity, and yet they were handed down to us from above by our parents, presumably. And perhaps this isn't such a notable thing, but it does strike me as a powerful form of autonomy for someone to be able to choose their own name. I mean, where we see this most presently in our society is with transgender or otherwise genderqueer individuals who transition and are able to then pick a new name for themselves that will come to embody their identity as they know it. And I've never gone through this process personally, so I don't know really what it's like, but I could imagine that it would be almost a liberating experience. As if you are kind of truly becoming, in an almost official and metaphysical way, your true self. I could also see how this could be difficult in some respects, because it's hard to depart from something that is so familiar, a name that perhaps has come to define your identity for so long. But when you think about if children were given the ability to choose their names from early on, we might be able to overcome that familiarity. That autonomy would be handed to them very early, and they would have the opportunity to shape their identity as they really start to come into themselves from an early age. And perhaps children that are, again, what I'm doing here is sort of speculating about a society where we allow the freedom and the autonomy for everyone to choose their own name. And so I imagine this would be a little bit difficult at first because, at least for a few years or months or however long it takes kids to be able to speak, they can't choose their own name. Unless it's just Gugu or Gaga. But, so perhaps we call them something for a while, a placeholder, simply out of convenience. But eventually we allow them to name themselves. And it certainly intrigues me how this ability to shape your own identity would have liberating effects on children. Perhaps it would make the child feel more responsible for their self and more aware of their conception of the self, which is a powerful thing for a child to understand. But truly, I want to even go beyond that, and let us now imagine a society where names are not even remotely concrete, where they could change depending on the relationship, the year, or even any particular moment. Perhaps this is unrealistic and would lead to too much confusion, but it is certainly a liberating concept. Imagine having a completely different name that each person in your life calls you. Not the same as a nickname necessarily, because you have no designated name to fall back on. You are literally all of the different names at different times, if that makes sense. To me, this kind of introduces a even more freeing idea of identity, where we're never pinned down. It allows us to truly free ourselves from this singular ego and to see that we're not defined by singularity, but by multiplicity. We are each of ourselves in each of these separate moments. We are not necessarily one united being. And moreover, our identity is shaped very crucially by our relationship with our fellow humans, not just with our individual selves. We are defined through our identity in relation to other identities, sort of to create conjunctive identities. And this is simply a thought experiment. I doubt society will really reach a point like this, and there's a very understandable convenience in our current naming conventions, as is pretty evident. However, I'm certainly not the first person to imagine society with entirely different naming conventions. One very common trope, which appears in dystopian science fiction and other types of science fiction, is the number name. What comes to mind for me, though not necessarily dystopian, is Finn, the stormtrooper from Star Wars. He starts with having just a number. I think it's FN2187. And clearly this represents, from a storytelling perspective, his distinct lack of identity. He is just another stormtrooper, another soldier in this sea of nameless soldiers. However, soon he turns his number into a real linguistic name, Finn.
Hey, what's your name? FN2187. What? That's the only name they ever gave me. Well, I ain't using it. FN, huh? Finn, I'm gonna call you Finn, is that alright? Finn. Yeah, Finn, I like that.
And through this, actually begins to discover his true identity and his true place. He's now his own person. And this trope comes up a lot in media, and clearly serves to represent sort of the dehumanization of the individual. So, names through this lens are viewed in the truly liberating way, which I have sort of been alluding to, and in a way that we don't commonly think about. Now, another example which strikes me, because I've read these books recently, is in the Earthsea books by Ursula K. Le Guin. If you're not familiar, they're set in a fantasy world where magic is tied very closely to names. So everything within the world of Earthsea has a true name, and if this true name is known, it can be used by wizards, people who use magic, to affect reality. So for example, they know the true name of the sea, the ocean, and so they can manipulate the ocean's currents or winds. But this element becomes most important with people who have both a true name and a use name. The true name is typically hidden and only known by the original person who named them, whereas the use name is what everyone calls them. Because of the power of magic, you can imagine why names would need to be hidden. If someone knows your name, they have great power over you, especially if they know how to use magic. So from a narrative perspective, revealing one's true name to another represents a great act of trust. And Le Guin uses this very cleverly to build relationships between individuals in her stories. And it allows deep levels of trust to be attained between characters simply by the sharing of their true names. This is very cool to me because it's really just a fantastic narrative device, but also it furthermore reveals the power that names can have. While we don't have anything like the true name and use names of the Earthsea world in real life, Le Guin, through naming, explores how the sharing of our identity becomes a vulnerable act, and how that this is key to building trust and relationships. It's important to be vulnerable and to understand that our identities are both deeply personal and incredibly social. And what I'm reminded of through all the examples I brought up is the act of acting or of role-playing, becoming a character, whether that be through a film, theater performance, or just playing D&D. This is sort of the closest we get in our normal lives, not in the realm of fantasy, to breaking free from our rigid identity that we come to understand. We literally take on another name when we act. We step into another person's shoes. And it's no wonder that this process can often feel very liberating, but also equally vulnerable. Why is acting so difficult? Almost embarrassing. Why does it feel so vulnerable to act? This is a tougher question than you may come to think. I think for one, it's a highly expressive experience, and one in which attention is focused entirely on you. But what allows actors to triumph over embarrassment and vulnerability is to step fully into the world of their characters, to cease to become themselves, faking emotions in front of an audience, and to become the character themselves, genuinely feeling the emotions that the character is feeling in the scene. So, to act is to lie, but it is also to be deeply truthful. It is to step outside of yourself and your identity, and one does this first and foremost by taking on another name. And now we see how liberating it is to be free of your name, and how, in fact, our fixed view of ourselves may in fact hold us back from truly understanding ourselves and from our relationships to others. We must be ready to be vulnerable and to open ourselves up. This is why I like to imagine a world where naming takes on a role of liberation of the self, because perhaps we will live more vulnerable and more truthful lives in such a world. So, that pretty much does it for my thoughts this video. I hope that you take something out of this. Give me your thoughts in the comments. I hope you engage with this in good faith, and I'll see you in the next one.